11 years ago, Jim Parsons' Sheldon unknowingly mocked young Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory, and the scene makes me cringe now knowing how successful the prequel became. Almost 6 years since The Big Bang Theory ended, it remains relevant thanks to its spin-offs, not to mention its streaming dominance. In 2024, Chuck Lorre and Bill Prade's sitcom was the most binged show on streaming, averaging 265.5 episodes per viewer on its main platform, Max. While it is an easy watch, some stand-up moments are now more interesting, considering everything that has happened since it wrapped. It's worth noting that CBS was only forced to cancel The Big Bang Theory because Jim Parsons decided to leave. Recognizing the importance of Sheldon in its storytelling, everyone decided it was best to end it with a complete ensemble. The franchise thrived after thanks to young Sheldon, an origin story for the socially inept genius. The shows only overlapped for 2 years, with the idea of the prequel not materializing until 2016, a year before the show premiered. A couple of years prior, however, Parsons' character managed to mock the spin-off, and I can't help but cringe when rewatching it. In The Big Bang Theory Season 7, Episode 12, The Hesitation Ramification, the whole Pasadena gang alongside Stewart gathered in Apartment 4A to watch Penny's special cameo in NCIS. Ahead of the actual scene, Sheldon started fuzzing about not being comfortable with simply watching a scene without any context of the previous episodes of the series. Annie leveled with her boyfriend and put things into perspective by saying that he should think of the past outings as the prequels, and somehow that eased Sheldon's concerns and settled him long enough to wait for Penny's supposed cameo. As someone who was never shy about his opinion, Amy's explanation working on Sheldon means that he actually believed her. The problem is that retroactively, this also poked fun at young Sheldon's existence, which was technically a prequel. While I understand that Amy and Sheldon's conversation was written before the idea of the Cooper family story in Texas was born, I still cringe whenever I come across this particular encounter. What makes this worse is that Parsons was heavily involved in the prequel, and Mayim Bialik made a few cameos, including in the young Sheldon final. In any case, Annie predicted how much young Sheldon would deviate from the Big Bang Theory canon. Granted that it stuck to it with major storylines, such as George's unexpected death and Sheldon's move to California for his postgraduate, but the prequel outgrowing its premise in the middle of its run meant that Lorre and his team tackled other storylines that wasn't exactly important to the socially inept genius life, but was integral to his family's history. Overall, despite The Big Bang Theory and young Sheldon loose connections, the great news is that both shows can be enjoyed together or separately. There's a particular scene in The Big Bang Theory, seemingly harmless, hilariously delivered, and unmistakably Sheldon Cooper, that now feels completely different when viewed through the lens of young Sheldon. What once elicited laughter now carries a faint sense of irony and unintentional self-parody. It's the kind of realization that makes you stop mid-laugh and think, did they just inadvertently throw shade at their own prequel? And it all starts with a single scene from The Big Bang Theory's earlier seasons that has aged in a way no one could have predicted, because young Sheldon didn't exist yet. But now that it does, it casts an awkward, cringe-worthy shadow over that very moment. Season 2, Episode 13 of The Big Bang Theory, titled The Friendship Algorithm, features Sheldon embarking on a mission to understand how to make friends. Classic Sheldon, right? But there's one line, just one, that now makes young Sheldon fans shift uncomfortably in their seats. In the scene, Sheldon says in his most matter-of-fact, know-it-all tone, cue the laughter track, of course. Back then, this line was a punchline, perfectly timed and quintessentially Sheldon. Arrogant, odd, and blissfully unaware of how absurd he sounds. It fit with his character's running joke that he's some kind of hyper-evolved intellect in a world full of lesser beings. But if you've seen young Sheldon, you know just how hard that line unintentionally mocks everything the prequel series stands for. The whole premise of young Sheldon is built around showing that Sheldon was very much a child, just a deeply gifted one. He had fears, insecurities, tantrums, obsessions, awkward puberty moments, emotional outbursts, and some very real human vulnerabilities. And his mother, Mary Cooper wasn't just a comical Bible-thumping Texan. She was a loving, complex woman who carried the weight of raising a child who didn't quite fit into his world. But the line, "I was never a child," completely undercuts that entire premise. Not only does it erase the nuance and emotional development young Sheldon gave him, but it also paints young Sheldon's struggles as irrelevant. Worse, it makes it feel like the Big Bang Theory version of Sheldon is almost mocking his own younger self. It's not that the line was written with malice, it wasn't. It was simply a clever joke in a sitcom that hadn't yet conceived of a prequel. But in retrospect, it's awkward. It's like watching someone roast a version of themselves they haven't met yet. It makes you wince a little now. The emotional disconnect. One of the most powerful elements of young Sheldon is how it humanizes Sheldon in a way the Big Bang Theory rarely attempted. In young Sheldon, we see his love for his Meemaw, his fractured but heartfelt relationship with his father George, his need for approval, and even moments of crushing loneliness. We witness him struggling to make sense of a world that didn't understand him, and a family that often didn't know how to help him. Contrast that with the Big Bang Theory Sheldon, who flippantly dismisses his childhood as some non-existent phase. The line feels like it betrays everything we now know about him. It's not just inaccurate, it's kind of cruel in hindsight. This tonal dissonance creates a strange emotional whiplash. The Sheldon from young Sheldon evokes empathy. The Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory is often played for laughs at the cost of emotional complexity. So when one mocks the other, intentionally or not, it feels jarring. What makes this even more surreal is that Jim Parsons himself, who delivered the infamous line, is also the narrator of young Sheldon. His voice, laced with wisdom and regret, guides us through the most formative years of his character's life. As a narrator, adult Sheldon often provides emotional context to the experiences we're watching on screen. So when you hear him say things like, "I didn't understand it then, but I would carry that moment with me for the rest of my life," it deepens our perception of Sheldon. It adds layers. It paints him as a person who has grown, matured, and reflected on his past. But when you circle back to that joke, "I was never a child," it almost feels like adult Sheldon is contradicting everything he's narrated with so much care. It's a paradox. The same voice that gives life to his younger self is also the one that dismisses it entirely in a throwaway joke. The bigger issue is how that one line now becomes part of a larger conversation about how characters evolve, or fail to evolve, across franchises. Sheldon Cooper is arguably one of the most iconic TV characters of the 21st century, but these two versions of him are increasingly hard to reconcile. The original Sheldon was designed to be a caricature, an exaggerated version of a brilliant but socially stunted scientist. But young Sheldon has spent years doing damage control, softening the edges, giving context to the quirks, and painting Sheldon as a product of his environment rather than a punchline. That joke, though, it's like a glitch in the system. A moment where the mask slips and we're reminded that before Sheldon was a fully fleshed out character, he was just a collection of quirks and zingers. That's hard to unsee once young Sheldon fills in the blanks. It's not cringe in the traditional "this is so awkward" way. It's a deeper kind of cringe, the kind that comes from realizing how a beloved character was once flattened into a joke, and how even the actor who would go on to enrich him inadvertently participated in that flattening. Maybe it's just a sign of how far the character has come. Maybe it's a reminder that even the most iconic TV moments don't always age well when new layers are added retroactively. Or maybe it's just a testament to how storytelling evolves, how it grows and twists in ways no one expects. But whatever it is, one thing's for sure, that one Jim Parsons scene hits differently now, and not in a good way. Because once you've seen young Sheldon cry for his dad, hug his Meemaw, or hide